Hello, and welcome to another episode of the High Danger Hockey Podcast. My name is Emma Miller, and I've got some exciting topics to discuss with y'all today. Of course, we're going to be looking at Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final and looking ahead to the rest of the series between the Florida Panthers and Edmonton Oilers. But there's also a really interesting NHL rumor that I'd love to discuss today. So we're going to talk about the buzz that's going around the NHL regarding Quinn Hughes and his future in Vancouver, or potentially lack thereof. So stay tuned. We've got a very exciting episode for you guys today, and let's get right into it. Talk some hockey. Right, so there's plenty of discussion to be had about the Stanley Cup Final, which has been nothing short of exhilarating so far. Game 2 absolutely one-upped the excitement that was Game 1, and that's not an easy feat to accomplish. Game 1 was thrilling. We saw an awesome overtime finish with just 30 seconds left in the game, and Game 2 had to say, you know what, let's go to double OT. You thought Game 1 was exciting? Let's kick it up a notch. So hopefully we see that continue to trend in a positive direction, because I've been loving every second of it so far. But before we start talking about Game 2 and beyond, I would actually like to talk about some buzz heading around the NHL right now surrounding Quinn Hughes, the captain of the Vancouver Canucks and former Norris Trophy winning defenseman. We got an update on this topic from NHL insider Elliot Friedman just the other day, so I wanted to chime in and discuss maybe where we could see Quinn end up next if it's not with the Canucks. So this buzz has been going on for the last couple of months, ever since GM Jim Rutherford said in his exit interview that Quinn has shared with him he'd really like to play with his brothers again someday, and that day might end up being a lot sooner than some people think. Unfortunately for Vancouver, there is a lot that is starting to unravel headed into the current offseason, and that starts with Rick Tocchet, their former head coach who decided not to re-sign with them and left to go join the Philadelphia Flyers instead, leaving the Canucks to hire Adam Foote as the new head coach. And losing Tocchet is going to be a big blow because he's really a very well-respected guy around the league and in the Canucks locker room. He's a player's coach. He's someone that garners a lot of respect and knows what he's doing. And he had a very successful Jack Adams winning season with them just the year prior. So he's really shown his potential to be a wonderful coach, and he's probably going to take the Flyers in the right direction moving forward, a struggling Flyers squad right now. And that kind of leaves the Canucks in the lurch now with Foote as the new bench boss. So not only did they have that coaching change happen at the end of the season, but there's also some key players that are probably going to be on the move looking ahead to this summer. One of those players is going to be Brock Boeser, who is a pending free agent. He's probably going to hit the market on July 1st. They were unable to get a contract extension done during the season, and Brock Boeser himself said that it was unlikely that he was going to end up in Vancouver next year. So Boeser is probably on his way out, and say what you will about the way that he has performed the last couple of seasons. Some people might say that Boeser has underperformed for, his skill level and the talent that he brings to the table, but he's still a key piece for the franchise. So it's going to be hard to move on from the Boeser era, so to speak. People had very high hopes after he broke into the league, having a strong rookie season. He was a Calder Trophy nominee, and he plateaued a bit, didn't necessarily progress as maybe some people had hoped or expected, but nevertheless, Boeser is a big part of that locker room and a big part of the team, and he's a really good player that is going to be walking away this summer. Of course, there was the locker room drama between JT Miller and Elias Pettersson that led to Miller being traded, and that's someone who's capable of scoring 100 points that got traded away because of some beef, because of some tension, so that goes to a potential culture issue in the locker room as well that you would hope would be solved once, one of the major issues in the equation is gone in JT Miller, but that put the Canucks in the headlines for all the wrong reasons during the regular season. And there are even rumors about Elias Pettersson being on the market on the trading block. So there's a lot that's starting to crumble in Vancouver. And given all the changes that the Canucks are going through, it makes sense that Quinn might not want to stick around for that. Now, he is undeniably a really good captain for them. He leads by example. He has a really nice sense of quiet leadership. He's an intelligent guy. He said in that Amazon behind the scenes documentary that he, loves to read. He reads so many books during the year. Quinn has a lot to offer in the locker room as well as on the ice. And he has dedicated a lot to the city of Vancouver, but the clock might be running. The timer might be ticking down, and we might see the end of his Vancouver Canucks career here coming soon. And you kind of can't blame him for that. You can't really blame him, as he's watching a lot of his teammates and the important members of his squad starting to depart. First Miller, then Rick Tocchet, now Brock Besser, maybe even Pettersson. The team is falling apart at the seams in a way. So you can't blame him for wanting to be somewhere where he will have greater success on a team level, as not just a personal level, as we've seen him really excel and develop into one of the best defensemen in the NHL. I would say, Cale Makar is probably ranked ahead of Hughes, but he's in the top 3 NHL defensemen right now, unquestionably. So contract-wise, Quinn has 2 years left on his deal right now, so now is a great time to consider moving him. They can't even start negotiating a contract extension until July 1st of next year. He's currently making $7.85 million on this deal he's on now, but he's probably going to get in the range of $11 million on his next contract, if not upwards of that. And he's just 25 years old right now. His next contract is going to be a huge one. It's going to be long-term, and it's going to be high value. And given the fact that Jim Rutherford kind of wink, nudged that Quinn might want to be reunited with his brothers on the New Jersey Devils, there are some things on the Devils side of things to consider if they are going to start having serious discussions about potentially trying to acquire Quinn Hughes and reunite him with Jack and Luke. And one of those things to take into consideration is that Captain Nico Hischier is going to be needing a new contract in the same time frame that Hughes is. So he's definitely going to be getting a pay raise as the captain, and I do expect him to be willing to sign a team-friendly deal, especially given the pieces around him. He seems to really love playing in New Jersey. He's a fantastic captain, a fantastic leader, nothing but great things to say about him on and off the ice from his teammates. So it is more than likely that he will re-sign in New Jersey, especially if Jack is going to stay, if Jesper is going to stay, if Timo is going to stay. And the goal is that those guys will still be here in 2 years. And that's another thing to take into consideration, is each of those players makes a substantial amount of money and will for the coming seasons. Timo Meier is under contract until 2031, and he's making $8.8 million annually. Jack Hughes is under contract until 2030, and he's making $8 million, which honestly is a bargain, by the way. And Jesper Bratt makes $7.8 million, and he's got a couple years left on his deal as well. So considering all of the huge contracts on the books right now, that's obviously not ideal for bringing in another guy who is instantly going to be the best defenseman on the team, unquestionably, and someone who's probably going to make $11-12 million on his next contract just 2 years from now. Those are all things that are really important to note when talking about whether or not the Devils are seriously wanting to acquire Quinn Hughes. But that being said, there are a couple of pieces for the Devils that would be really valuable in a trade trying to get Quinn. One of those guys is going to be Dawson Mercer, who is still young, and he just hasn't produced at the level that the Devils had expected him to. And Mercer does a lot of great things away from the puck. He plays a pretty strong two-way game. He just doesn't generate the offense that they need him to. And, they've given him chances throughout the year. Sheldon Keefe has given him numerous chances to prove himself on the first and second line, but he's also spent time playing really throughout the entire lineup, and there wasn't much that Sheldon Keefe could do. There weren't many more positions to put him in that would have encouraged him to produce more offense. So, as much as I love Dawson Mercer, he could be really good trade bait for this situation, and he would fit in really well for what the Vancouver Canucks are going to want to start doing in the future, which is staying younger and reshaping the franchise. Simon Nemec is another player that could be on the move in a deal like this, and again, it would hurt to lose someone like Nemec, who is a young defenseman, and he's really shown flashes of super high potential as a competitive defenseman in the NHL. And he's definitely still going through growing pains at this point, and he does struggle with giveaways, turnovers, missteps, but he also scored a giant goal for the Devils, that double overtime goal in the playoffs against the Carolina Hurricanes, and he has shown really great offensive instincts as well. So it would hurt to lose Nemec, but again, he's young, he has a lot to bring to the table, and if the Canucks are going to be willing to trade away a franchise elite level defenseman, then getting a younger guy back who has some of the same qualities that Hughes does. Granted, I don't see Nemec ever being as good as Quinn Hughes currently is and will continue to get, but I do think he has a lot to offer. He's a skilled young defenseman, and again, I don't think losing Nemec would impact the Devils in a tremendously negative way. Yeah, it would hurt to see him go, in a sense, but at the same time, he brings a lot to the table, and I think he would be someone else that would fit in well on the Canucks lineup. And a third option here is Dougie Hamilton, who there is a lot of buzz around potentially moving. He's getting older, he has a pretty big contract, and that's not to say the Canucks even really want him, especially in a deal like this, because that's a big downgrade for the Canucks, making a similar amount of money to Quinn, but is much older, 7-8 years older, and just not the guy that you want to start building your roster around, since they're probably going to be entering a full-blown rebuild starting in this offseason. So maybe not the most realistic that Dougie Hamilton will go to Vancouver, but that works. He would probably be he would be a top pairing defenseman on the Canucks, especially if Quinn is leaving. And again, they make similar amounts of money on the books, so on paper, it would make sense. Will that actually happen? Probably not. And none of this is reinventing the wheel. This is what a lot of Devils fans are speculating about, and a lot of Devils blogs and insiders are writing about, is Mercer and Nemec are likely the two guys that would make the most sense to go in this trade. So I'm kind of just reiterating a lot of what I've been doing research on, and a lot of opinions that I happen to agree with, that a lot of Devils fans are talking about on Twitter. If you're interested in more Devils news, I highly recommend checking out Pucks and Pitchforks. Very knowledgeable group of writers over there, very frequent updates, and very in tune with the pulse of, NHL rumors and buzz. So it was just interesting to hear Elliot Friedman's comments that, Vancouver is on the clock when it comes to Quinn Hughes, and he's going to want to go somewhere where he has a chance of winning sometime sooner or later. And right now, Vancouver doesn't look like they're going to be a contender at the level that Quinn Hughes might want them to be. All right, so moving right along, let's get to Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final between the Edmonton Oilers and Florida Panthers. And boy, was it a show. It was such an entertaining back-and-forth game, trading the leads, and then a double overtime finish. You can't ask for more out of a Stanley Cup Final game with some of the most elite talent in the NHL right now. Really exciting, high-quality hockey, and it has been nothing but a joy to watch every second of it so far. And something that jumped out to me during the course of Game 2 is that the Panthers are making adjustments on the fly, and they are really starting to adapt to learn how to combat the Edmonton Oilers game plan. And I think the perfect example of this is Leon Draisaitl scored 2 goals in Game 1, and they were very similar in the way that they were scored. He was left pretty much undefended, backdoor, and had a lot of net to work with, and beat Sergei Bobrovsky fairly easily both times. Bobrovsky did get back quicker on the second goal, so he kind of anticipated, Draisaitl is right there, I should probably try to get over, and Leon was too quick with it, still hit the back of the net for that overtime winner in Game 1. And something that I noticed was we almost saw another goal that was almost identical to those first two, where Leon is left open, right back door, and this time Sergei got over right in time and made a spectacular save on Draisaitl there. So that to me encapsulates what the Panthers are doing as they learn how the Edmonton Oilers function, and as they learn what's going to work best against them. Bobrovsky is doing that as well. Now, the defenders are maybe not, for the reason that Leon Draisaitl was left open in the same area where he produced 2 goals the other day, yet again. But Bobrovsky, reading that play, being able to anticipate that and make that save was, I feel, kind of metaphorical in a way, in the greater way that the Panthers are able to start changing their game plan just slightly, making those small tweaks, to get under the Oilers' skin and to really defend against them well. And that they did in Game 2. We had a very high-scoring affair. It was a 5-4 double overtime finish win for the Panthers. So it might sound a little puzzling to be talking about the Panthers doing well defensively, but they are really learning. Bobrovsky also, shout out, made 42 saves in this one. The Oilers were very high volume with their shots in this game, kind of like the first one. Same old, especially with the guys that are pulling the trigger. Those are high quality shots that you're having to stop. So hats off to Bobrovsky. 42 saves, huge game for him. And offensively, I would like to give a little bit of nod to Florida's blue line, in fact. Specifically Nate Schmidt. He continues to impress me. Watching him has been really enjoyable, and he went through a couple of up and down seasons, but Schmidt has really emerged as a game changer for the Florida Panthers on their blue line, and he had 2 assists in this game too. 4 total in the series so far. He's had 2 helpers in each of the first 2 games, all really beautiful playmaking passes. In Game 1, we saw him join in the rush as the left wing and make a nice assist that way. And we've also seen him, quarterbacking the point and making really good setups there. So that's just one member of the Florida Panthers blue line that is really contributing offensively. Seth Jones and Dmitry Kulikov each scored a goal in this game too. And Gustav Forsling really continues to shut things down on the back end of things. So the defensive core is really contributing. So the defensive core being able to jump in on the score sheet as well as get back and defend against the Oilers, top guns is really big, and it's making a big difference for the Panthers. On the flip side of things, the Oilers struggled a bit at times. The power play was not very good in Game 2. It went just 1 for 6, and one of those failed power plays was a 5-on-3. They had a 2-man advantage for, I think, 35 seconds-ish, and didn't get a whole lot done there. So being able to score on those power plays more would instantly be a game changer. It could kill the momentum of the Panthers. It could swing the momentum of the game entirely in Edmonton's direction, and they failed to convert on 5 out of their 6 power plays. So that's really noteworthy here. And in fact, Brad Marchand actually scored a shorthanded goal for the Panthers. So it seemed at times like Florida was getting better chances on Edmonton's power play than the Oilers were themselves. However, on the 1 power play goal the Oilers did score, what a beauty. Instant highlight reel classic. Leon Draisaitl, of course, was the one to light the lamp on a feed from none other than Connor McDavid. Surprise, surprise, am I right? Seeing those 2 guys skate together is really just magical. A lot of times they separate the 2 of them, but they've been playing McDavid and Draisaitl alongside Corey Perry at times 5-on-5, and it has been a pleasure to see those guys bounce off of each other on a consistent basis. And what an effort from McDavid for the assist on that goal. He absolutely broke Alex Barkov's ankles and then was able to get his way around Aaron Ekblad as well, dangled around both of them with ease. He made it look so crazy simple, and then set up Draisaitl perfectly for that power play goal. So the 2 of them continue to really work well together, unsurprisingly, of course, but that's been really fun to see. They also both assisted on the goal from Evan Bouchard, so seeing the magic that the 2 of them create together is really just a joy to watch. For the Panthers, there have been some standouts as well offensively, and first of all, Sam Bennett deserves a shout out for his goal-scoring contributions. He actually set an NHL record last night with 12 goals on the road in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and he broke a record that was previously held by Mark Scheifele back in 2018. So kudos to Sam Bennett for that. Now, on the more negative side of things for Bennett, he was at the center of another controversy, and I'm getting a little sick of saying that because I find myself constantly talking about the different shenanigans that Sam Bennett gets himself into, and Game 2 was no different. This time, it looked like he almost seriously injured Oilers goalie Stuart Skinner. It was dangerously close. Skinner went down for several minutes. The trainer came out, was looking at him. He visibly looked like he was in a decent amount of pain, and it was kind of a weird sequence of events leading up to the contact that Bennett made with Skinner. So Bennett, of course, is crashing the net as he always does. He's a strong net front presence. He always likes to screen the opposing goalie, and Matthias Ekholm was defending him in this scenario. So they were battling it out in front of the net a little bit, and Ekholm was challenging him physically and kind of pressuring him to move horizontally across the crease, right? And this knocked Bennett off balance a little bit, and he turned his body and fell into Stuart Skinner. And, they kind of made a little bit of contact. Skinner fell backwards, followed by Bennett falling backwards, and Bennett fell awkwardly on Skinner's leg. So it initially appeared to be potentially some kind of knee injury, Skinner looked like he was in pain. There were concerns that it actually was a serious injury because of the amount of time he stayed down and the amount of time the trainer was out there working with him. It was definitely a concerning couple of minutes there for the Oilers because Skinner, despite allowing 5 goals, put up a pretty strong performance. So it's not surprising to see Bennett, again, mixing it up in front of the net like that. And yes, Ekholm did pressure him physically, but something that stood out to me is that Ekholm did not have a ton of momentum. It's not like he came crashing into Bennett, and in fact, it's not like he even pushed him in the direction of the goaltender. As I mentioned earlier, he was kind of pushing him through the blue paint as opposed to back in towards the net. And as Bennett stumbled off balance a little bit, he kind of turns his body, and I won't say that he intentionally made contact with Skinner because I don't want to put that out there and I can't read his mind, right? But it's hard to imagine that he would turn. I don't know why he would turn his body like that when falling, if not to try to take the goalie out of the play, whether by offering a screen or offering another body in front. So Sam Bennett's doing Sam Bennett things. He's knocking over goalies, almost injuring them, getting in people's heads, and then scoring a ton of goals. So nothing new on that front. And again, Stuart Skinner put up another fairly strong performance. I did think that he could have stopped that overtime game winner. It was just like an awkward flat puck that was rolling across the ice and it just slid in 5-hole. It wasn't a particularly, dangle snipe selly type of goal. It just kind of sailed in between his legs. So I feel that one maybe could have been stopped, but we can sit here and pick apart the goaltender all day. Could he or could he not have made that save? I don't know. And although the Oilers did lose, they continue to be the comeback kids. It looked like they really had a solid chance at winning. They played extremely well in that first overtime. They had 16 shots in that first overtime period. So they really commanded play at times offensively there. And Corey Perry scored the latest game-tying goal in Stanley Cup Final history with just 18 seconds left. So again, you can never count out this team. I said it in my last episode. If you're interested in hearing a little bit more about the statistics surrounding comeback wins, I would love for you to go check out my Game 1 recap. But it's just more of the same for Edmonton, and the Panthers were able to grind out that victory this time thanks to Brad Marchand. One of the newest additions to the Panthers, 37 years old. Everyone expected him to retire as a Boston Bruin. Nope, surprise. Here he is in Florida, and boy are they glad they got him at the trade deadline because he scored 2 goals in this game, one was a pure breakaway and one was a more partial breakaway, that overtime goal. And his shorthanded goal earlier in the game was beautiful as well on that breakaway. Fun fact about Brad Marchand, exactly 14 years ago, to the day, he also scored a shorthanded goal against the Vancouver Canucks during the Stanley Cup Final in 2011. And in that Stanley Cup Final, the Boston Bruins would end up winning in 7 games. So who knows if that's really a trend or if that's just a crazy coincidence. I tend to lean more on the side of crazy coincidence. But 14 years to the day, 2 shorthanded goals, one in 2011, one in 2025. And the first time around, his team ended up winning in 7 games. So who knows what that could mean going forward. But boy, do I hope this series goes to 7 games. I just gotta say. So we're headed back to Florida for the next couple of games here, and the Panthers have had mixed results on home ice during the playoffs. They're just 4-3, surprisingly. They've really been an away team powerhouse, and that's really what's carried them this far. But they're just 1 win over 500 on home ice. Meanwhile, the Oilers have been a very strong road team as well. They're 6-3 on the road this year. It'll be interesting in the second straight Stanley Cup Final between these two teams whether or not the Panthers will have as much home ice success as they would hope, if those home fans are really going to invigorate them and give them the momentum emotionally that they need to carry out a win here. So I'm really looking forward to seeing Game 3 on Monday, and I will continue to talk about all things Stanley Cup Final and NHL news as we progress through this series. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. I really appreciate your time. If you're watching us on YouTube, feel free to leave a like and comment. I would love to hear your thoughts about Quinn Hughes and your Stanley Cup predictions. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, thank you as well for joining me here. We do have a visual version of this episode on YouTube. If you'd like to go ahead and check that out. And if you're interested in staying in touch with High Danger Hockey, you can find us across social media. You can follow us on X at High Danger Pod, and you can also find us on TikTok at High Danger Hockey. It has been an absolute blast talking about these topics with you guys today, so I'd love to hear your thoughts if you're interested in connecting with us on social media, and thank you for listening. We've got plenty more content coming up for you in the future, so please stay tuned, and I will see you in the next episode. Thank you, and take care.